Welcome one, welcome all to the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast. If you like going off-roading in Toyotas, wrenching on Toyotas, camping in Toyotas, and maybe even poking a little bit of fun in Toyotas, and of course, hearing about how fantastic anti-squat is in Toyotas, then this is the podcast for you. That's right, ladies and germs. My name is Tyler. And joining me for a Monday fun day is Mr. Jimmy Fun Day himself, Jet. Mr. Fun Day, how are you?
I am well. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing actually pretty good. I feel surprisingly well for still testing positive for COVID. I just kind of feel like I have a little bit of congestion up in my sinuses, and that's about it. And otherwise I'm doing a bunch of stuff, working around the house and cutting up axles and all sorts of fun stuff. So
excellent. That sounds good. Yeah, I had a congestion even long for like another week or two after testing positive. So yeah, just if you're feeling that good now, that's a good sign. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Nothing can keep me down. How does that song go? Ain't nothing gonna hold me down.
Oh no. I've got to keep on moving.
Story of my life. Oh man. So cool, man. Awesome. Good stuff. We'll talk about some updates from the weekend here on Thursday's episode. We have a really fun, lengthy episode packed in for you guys today. We got a special guest who we flew out in the Snail Trail 4x4 private jet. Thank you to Tyson for letting us borrow that again.
Yeah, I know. I do want to say a big shout out to Tyson that he was able to work that in with us and steal that jet away from the Wheeling Wine and Whiskey guys, and now has it in our name, wrapped snail, beautiful snail yellow jet flying through the sky. It's awesome.
It is pretty cool. And yeah, we've been able to finally eliminate all the Wheeling Wine and Whiskey logos and stickers out of the whole exterior and interior of the jet. So
they like hit a sticker under every seat. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was kind of annoying. It just kind of got to a point where I was like, let's just replace all the seats.
Right. We put PRP reclining seats in that jet.
There we go. Air suspension PRPs in all of them.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Anyways, we flew out Brian from 4Wheel Underground from Arizona, and I got to hang out outside of the recording studio because I was Typhoid Mary, and I sat back like 20, 30 feet away from everybody. And
we used the longest XLR cable we have and sat like there's 3 chairs around the table, and then Tyler was like halfway across the parking lot.
It's true. To hear what you guys were talking about, we had to call me on my cell phone so that I could listen to what you guys were saying. So, no, it was a lot of fun having everybody out there. I felt kind of bad, though, because, Brian's from Arizona, where it's normally 158 degrees. He was a little cool there for a while in the 65-degree Sacramento weather.
Right. I'm sure the temperature is pretty low in Arizona right now, though.
I don't think it gets below 110 in Arizona ever. So
even at the middle of the night.
No, so huge thanks to Brian to coming out and Justin for coming up from San Jose. It was fun hanging out with those two for the limited time I did. You got to hang out with them a lot more than I did. So it sounds like you guys had a lot of fun. You got into some shenanigans that evening after I went home and you guys went off to get food and hang out without me. So
yeah, that was the best part of the weekend right there.
Getting rid of me.
Yeah.
Figures. Oh man. Did anything happen afterwards of interest or just hanging out?
Just a lot of hanging out, some off-road, truck talk for pretty much the rest of the evening to some extent. And yeah, we went out to Burgers and Brew and had some good burgers. And
nice.
Justin and I got a Buffalo Blue Burger.
That's my favorite burger there.
Is it? With the actual buffalo, it's actual buffalo meat, which is crazy. Yep. So that's kind of fun. I've had buffalo or bison meat before, and which I think I believe they're different animals, a bison and a buffalo, or they're really related. I don't know.
Yeah.
Brian can get back to us.
Where they are geographically.
I got it. Yeah. And then I don't remember what Brian had, but we all had different beers. And then afterwards, we decided to walk to Locked Barrel, which is probably the largest whiskey collection in the Sacramento region.
Yeah.
And Justin was driving home back to San Jose, so he didn't have anything. I wasn't really driving. I jumped into Brian's car and he took me around for the evening. So I had a flight of 4 shots, which was pretty fun. It wasn't
Nice.
like going to a distillery. It was, where they give you 1/4 ounce pours. There was 4 1-ounce pours. And I had this really interesting whiskey called like Nulu. It was like Nulu.
Okay.
It was a floral whiskey, which kind of threw me off, but I kind of liked it, and I'm kind of not sure if I liked it. It was weird, but it stuck in my memory, right? So I'm talking about it.
Yeah. Well, you do like your lavender soft top, so
that's
it makes
true.
sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I went back to the vehicles and parted ways, and he had an early flight in the morning, so we didn't go out too late.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, cool. Yeah, I'm glad he got to come over and he had a good time, and you guys got to do some whiskey and some burgers, and I just got to be in lockdown at home. So
yeah.
Nah.
No, it was a good time. It was a lot of fun hanging out with Brian and getting to know him more on a personal level, and besides just chatting over the phone. So it was a lot of fun.
Nice. That's cool. Well, yeah, we had Brian over down at the studio and got to record with him and pick his brain about suspensions.
Yes.
And all different types of link suspension setups, and what is, some of the terminology that we're talking about when you start talking about suspension link setups. It went on fairly long, so there's a lot of really good info here, but there's so much more information that we can talk about when it comes to suspensions. Like, we didn't even get into coilovers or shocks at all.
No.
Like, we barely touched the surface of that. And so I think we can get into a lot more about tuning coilovers. What are the differences between, air shocks versus, your typical oil nitrogen shocks versus ORIs, and how all that plays into your suspension as well. We never really touched on spring rates, how to calculate spring rates and figure spring rates into your suspension setup. So I think there's a lot more that we're going to be able to talk about, and it's going to be a lot of fun having Brian as kind of now this call-in pro to chat about all these different suspension things.
Oh,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, I do think there's probably going to be a follow-up episode, if not 2.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that goes into suspensions and linked setups, and trying to figure out how the proper geometry and how to set it all up, that if anybody has any questions, feel free to write in or call in, and we'll get Brian back on the horn and, be able to cover a lot of this stuff. I think it's really neat to have sort of I'm going to throw him under the bus here, an expert under, somebody that we can go and talk to about these things and help share it for everybody else. So this is really cool.
Yep, 100%. So before we get into the interview, we always have housekeeping stuff, but we'll keep it short. So just make sure that if you guys want to get in for the giveaway this month, which is a fun little blown molded case with drawers full of gear wrench tools, kind of your everything you would need to get started with tools. It's normally retail value about $550 to $600 over on Amazon at least, and it's on sale right now for like $280. So if you don't want to wait to see if you win one at the end of the month, then you can always just go on and get one at a phenomenal price. And you can also go into any of your kind of national chain stores that sell gear wrench stuff, and they should be able to get you a good price on them as well. So
yeah, absolutely. They're a fantastic bang for your buck item. And if you want to get in for that, you can grab that $10 tier on iRate 4x4. If you're on a mobile device, scroll all the way down to the bottom from the Snail Trail 4x4 podcast forum, and you'll find the signups there. If you're on a desktop, it's on the right side. Also, I do want to say that episode 350 is next Monday, and we are going to be recording that on Friday. So if you want to put your questions in, then you have to do it this week and do it as soon as possible, because on Friday, we are going to be sitting down, having some wine, and going over these questions with our significant others. And I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a fantastic episode.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be some. I already know some goofballs who have been putting in questions, submitting questions here. So they're already getting like super giggity. What would the word be? I don't know what I'm trying to think of.
You're trying to say they're getting excited for hearing us answer their questions, but I don't know what that if there's a term for that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. They're just. I know that they're every time I bring it up or they bring it up, they're like, "Hey, have you read the questions yet?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh my god, blah blah blah." I know that there's a few goofballs in there.
Oh, absolutely. How about anxious? Are
Yeah.
they getting pretty anxious about their questions?
No, it's like anytime they ask me if I've read the questions and I tell them no, they just start giggling like a little schoolgirl, and I'm just like,
yeah,
giddy. That's what I was looking for.
Got it.
Oh my god. Anyways, I have a magical way with words, everybody. Make sure you guys go if you want to leave some questions for us that we will answer all the questions. We may not air all the questions though. So if you guys want to leave a question, definitely go do that through the Google form link down in the show notes here underneath every episode. I guess it's just going to be under this one, and Thursday will be the last of them since we record Friday for that episode. Yeah, you have until then to get some questions in, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, I think we should jump over and have a great conversation with Brian about 4 linking, 3 linking, old school trucks, and suspension kits for Toyotas. And don't, all you Jeep owners or anybody else out there, don't get discouraged. I mean, maybe he doesn't make a kit for your application, but the knowledge here is applied to everything out there.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, we talk a lot about not just, Toyotas or how it relates to Toyotas, but it's, what are we talking about when we're talking about anti-squat and anti-dive numbers, roll center numbers, articulation, all that kind of stuff, and how does it impact the vehicle? What do panhard bars do? Or, do you want to have a mechanical linkage steering or full hydro steering? So we got into a lot of it. It was a lot of fun. There was one point where I did ask Brian that, is there a way to create a diving effect on the front end of the vehicle during acceleration? I was thinking, for like rock bouncer rigs that are doing big hill climbs, high horsepower vehicles, maybe the sand rigs that are doing these massive 1,000-foot sand dune climbs kind of thing. Maybe you get that suck down effect. And he originally had said that no, there's no way to do that. But he came back to us later on. I'm guessing after he had a couple whiskeys in him.
Maybe. Yeah. Might have opened the mind a little bit,
Yeah. And he said you actually can make that happen. It would require obscene amounts of anti-squat and anti-dive. You're looking at he said around 150% on both of them in order to make that happen, which would make the car almost undrivable on roads. But he said it can be done if that's like all you're looking to do with the vehicle. And I was like, interesting. Okay. That kind of makes sense. But I was just kind of curious if, there's different types of off-roading where you can intentionally mess with the numbers to make a very niche vehicle out of. So,
and it sounds like you could, but some aspects, I'm not sure you'd want to make the rear end that light also.
Exactly. I agree.
So you probably want to do more weight on the rear to some extent. It'd be interesting. And I'm sure there's maybe some way to try to get the whole vehicle just to, during acceleration, both front and rear get sucked down. There's probably some mathematical formula to figure that out also, but maybe we'll ask him in another time or another date, and we'll have him back to say like, what silly, stupid mathematical things can we do?
Exactly. Oh man, cool. Good stuff. So I guess that's all we have for now. Without further ado, everybody go ahead and grab your favorite drinks, grab your favorite snacks, and definitely grab a notepad. Anybody who's looking at going from leaf springs to a linked system, or maybe you've got radius arms underneath an FJ80 or underneath a Jeep or something, or you're trying to take radius arms from an F250 axle to go to 3-link, take some notes because a lot of good stuff here. And then we'll have Brian on again in the future to do some follow-ups and talk about some other fun stuff. Shall we?
Sounds great.
All right, we'll be right on back with Brian from 4Wheel Underground and Justin from San Jose. Oh, welcome back, ladies and gentle ladies. We have here, since I'm Typhoid Mary, apparently, trying to stay away from everybody, but we're outside of the studio hanging out with two gentlemen today who hopefully are going to school us and drop some knowledge bombs about suspensions. So this has been an episode we've been wanting to do for a very long time. I think it's how long have we been doing the podcast now, Jimmy?
Oh, we're over 3 years.
3 years. So we've been looking at doing this episode for about 2 years and 12 months, right around there.
Yep, exactly. So 2 years and 16 months, maybe.
Yeah. So we have Brian here in the house from 4Wheel Underground. Brian, say hi to everybody so everyone knows what you sound like.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Nice. And we have Justin here. And I don't know where did Justin, he just kind of showed up randomly from behind a tree the other day.
He drove a Tundra, so he's definitely welcome.
I just popped in. Yep. I was walking down the street and decided to step in.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, there you go.
He goes, hey, what is this recording equipment going on in the parking lot?
Right. There you go. Yeah, no, Justin has some 4Wheel Underground equipment and
I sure do.
And some parts underneath what you got. A third gen 4Runner, you said?
Currently have a third gen 4Runner with 4Wheel Underground's front 3-link suspension system.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
On 16-inch coilovers.
Nice.
Ooh.
And in the past, I had an FZJ80 with the front 3-link.
Okay.
4Wheel Underground front 3-link as well.
So we got we have a customer here and the owner here today.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get into, I think, some fun stories. We're going to learn a little bit more about these two gentlemen here. We're going to learn about suspensions. We're going to learn about what 4Wheel Underground does. I'm pumped.
Absolutely.
Everybody else ready?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Ready to go?
Roll.
All right, Brian.
Yes, sir.
What's your wheeling background here? Obviously, I think you're going to be kind of the professional here that gets to school us on all these different terms and what it means to have a 4-link or a 3-link or whatever else is going on. So how did you start getting into suspensions? How did you start getting into off-roading? Where did all this come from here?
I got into off-roading probably in, it was like 1996.
Okay.
I had a buddy of mine take me out on the Mojave Desert Trail. I had like this crappy, old, falling apart Bronco 2 with bald tires, and I shouldn't have really been off-road.
Nice. That's, I think, how a lot of us start, though.
Yeah, street tires where the cord's showing. Hey, let's go off-road. That sounds like a great idea. And he took me on the Mojave Desert Trail, and I loved it. And then the next thing I know, I'm following him around, and he had a 87 Toyota, and he had 529s and 33 95s on it.
Ooh.
And the thing went everywhere, or so we thought at the time, because, like a 2-foot boulder and then a curb after that was hardcore back in that day.
Well, yeah.
That was,
It's still hardcore for me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we can tell. But, after that, I ended up getting a 84 black on black, kind of looked like the, Back to the Future truck.
Okay. So 84 pickup, not a 4Runner?
It was an 84 pickup, standard cab, 3-inch lift, 33-inch 12.5s, under-geared, underpowered, 22R. Didn't even have the RE in it yet.
Perfect.
And I did my best to try and keep up with him. I had a solid axle. Of course, he had an IFS because he had an 87. And so I learned very quickly the power of lockers.
Yeah.
Yes. He could do things I could not do. So, but after that, I blew the motor and picked up a 85 4Runner that was sitting on the side of the road with some busted windshield. And I think I counted like 21 Black Widows under the hood and 4 flat tires. And I said, hey, this is a good idea. So I bought that. It was about the time that All Pro Off-Road was just in their infancy, and
sorry, I got to stop real quick.
Yeah.
Can that just go to show kind of the mentality of off-roaders when we see a vehicle in that state of repair with that many Black Widows under the hood, and we're like, hell yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, to a 20-year-old, it sounds like a great idea.
Right. Okay, so all right, so all pros in their infancy.
All pro in their
Okay.
infancy. Marlon Crawler, I don't even think he had a website at the time.
Oh wow.
And I knew of him, but that
Mhm.
was about it.
Okay.
And the thing obviously wasn't driving, and I had an ex-girlfriend roller 95 and a half Tacoma, and so I bought it off of her.
Uh-huh.
So I did a 3RZ swap
Nice.
in
Those are great.
99,
Mm-hmm.
and dashboard swap, AC heater, blower box, the steering column, the windshield wiper motor. I mean, I pilfered the hell out of that Tacoma
Mm-hmm.
and shoved it into an 85 4Runner, drove up to Marlin's in a buddy's Tacoma, and he rebuilt the tranny and transfer case right there. And I told him, hey, all you got to do is swap the bell housings on these things and change out the oil pan. Next thing you know, 3RZ swaps are a thing. And so after that, I had no fear at that point because it was a second vehicle, and I said, screw it. If I burn it to the ground, I burn it to the ground. So
you get
what?
another one. You go find another
So,
Black Widow infested vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. So then I had the fortune of meeting a guy by the name of Dave Zartman, who had just started a magazine called 4Wheel Drive Toyota Owner, and picked him up from the airport to go do the Marlon Crawler Roundup.
nice.
MCR.
Yeah, and had good times there, and he liked me, and he said, hey, you should try your hand at riding, which I've proven I suck at. So
We all need to know our skills.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
for sure.
yes, I found out very quickly. Not really my forte on that one.
Me
Okay,
neither.
but I ended up picking up a link kit and putting it on, and did my best with it, and wasn't overly happy with it. And so I kind of spent the next 5 years tearing apart just the front end of that thing. Once or twice a year, I'd tear it apart and cut something off and move it, and just kind of make a mental note of how it was driving, because in its form, going from the All Pro leaf springs to what I had with that link kit, I couldn't drive the thing down the road. And so it was scary. It was death wobble. It had too much toe in and too much caster and the wrong spring rates and no valving and bump steer, and it was just not working.
Interesting. Okay.
And over the course of 5 years, I learned spring rates. I learned valving. I learned geometry. And then because of being able to write for the magazine, I interviewed a guy by the name of Dan Barcroft, who was the Pirate 4x4 XL 4-link calculator inventor.
That's where I've heard that name. I was like, I just read that name recently somewhere.
Yeah. So, and
Okay.
he is an engineer.
Oh, okay.
And so he's certified to talk about all that stuff. And so I got to interview him, and I spent a good 40 hours on the phone with him over the course of 2 or 3 weeks so that I could gather up enough layman's terms data and actually try to write an article for the magazine.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what taught me about what I was already doing and why it was working. And I realized at that point,
So you were kind of, up until that point, you were kind of like, oh, I know if I move this here, it gets better. If I move it here, it gets even better. If I move it here, oh, it gets a lot worse. So you kind of had that information, but you didn't know why.
yeah, I
Those
couldn't
changes
explain
were-
it to anybody at the
Okay.
time, but I just knew what I was doing was either working or not working.
Gotcha.
Okay. Put
Okay.
that one there. Oh, not so good. Back up.
Okay.
But then having an engineer explain it to you, I kind of went, oh. And then of course I realized that, the only thing out there at the time was really kind of a DIY kit. And there's a lot of people that wanted to do it, but didn't know how.
They were going to go down the road of putting something here, going, oh, that doesn't work. Take it
Yep.
off, put it over
Yeah,
here.
they were going to
Do
suffer
the
like
same
I
thing.
did at that point.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I don't have anything to lose. It was like 2010. The
Mhm.
market was hell.
Yeah.
I needed money. So I said, okay, well, let's do it.
Nice.
And here we are, 12 years later, and actually have a decent little name for myself. So
Yeah. That's
So
cool.
is that when 4Wheel Underground started? You started the business then?
it was 2010. Yeah.
Okay. Just because you figured...
Nobody else was doing it. And
Yep.
I knew mine was working, and I was praying that everyone else thought the same thing. And there was enough people online at that point during the chat forum days that everybody who knew me were like, thought, oh, hey, he actually does know what he's talking about. And so I, said, what the heck? So I made the product and put it out there. And I still remember the first 5 kits I made and the guys getting them going, wow, I took a chance and I'm glad I did because this thing drives great.
Nice.
I drive my kids to school in this thing's driving better than my 4Runner is. So
Okay.
Nice.
With those first few sales, how did you actually go about getting those sales at your infancy of your business?
I have no idea.
No. Word of mouth.
I was just online
pirate?
and people had tech questions and I tried to answer them.
Okay.
And then somebody said, yeah, it's too bad nobody's got a kit that already does this. And, I'd kind of like, and
Slyly
there it goes.
raise your hand
right,
up.
Yes. Me
Right here,
over
buddy.
here, this guy.
Okay, cool.
So,
Yeah, even, still to this day, there's not a lot of companies out there that make link kits for the older style Toyotas.
True.
Or for like specific applications.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a lot of Jeep stuff, but not
Yeah.
for on the Toyota side.
No.
Yeah, there's a lot of DIY.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's a lot of DIY.
A lot of DIY. You buy some brackets, you buy the Dom tubing, you buy some joints, and you get to kind of figure out where to put everything.
Yeah, you gotta go online or ask somebody on Facebook what to do, how to do it, and there's one thing I learned is that there's definitely a different version of success from one person to another.
Yeah.
And I've had guys link their own trucks and sell them, decide to buy another one, and go, instead of doing it myself, I'm going to try 4Wheel Underground. And so far, I've never had anyone come back to me and regret that. They've all said, wow, that was actually better than the version I had.
Nice.
So I tend to think I'm doing something right there.
No, that's really cool. Yeah, a lot of times if you're, from being in the side of business, if you get a lot of feedback from your customers, you can typically start figuring out, hey, this is how we need to have products start moving, or you start figuring out, oh, hey, we have actually a pretty cool product here.
Yeah.
And you can make changes a lot quicker as your customers give you feedback
Yes,
about everything,
absolutely.
which is really cool. So that's neat. So 2010 is where kind of you started it off with. We're now 12 years later. How has things kind of evolved? Have you been able to like crazily scale up production? How many kits are you pumping out? Like how has things evolved here?
Yeah, I mean, the first 6 months we sold about 5.
Okay.
And things have slowly progressed and gotten bigger and bigger and better. And, we've had a couple of downer years and whatnot. 2019 was not a great year for me, but there was a lot of life changes going on in 2019 for me. And at that particular time, I was considering just walking away from it
Oh, wow.
and saying, screw it, I don't care. It was a bummer of a year.
Glad you didn't.
Yeah, I'm glad
right.
I didn't too. But since then, we're supporting more than just like a 1985. We moved into the first gen Tacoma era and the similar model year 4Runners. We've ditched the original 4-link design in favor of a new 4-link design with a lower roll center.
Okay.
To be slightly more modular and not be as axle specific as the original design that used to sit directly on top of the differential itself.
Okay.
So we went with a truss style just to be able to have more offerings essentially.
Yeah. Be a little bit more universal.
Slightly more universal or modular. And now of course we've got 4 different rear systems for these vehicles that we call phase 4 because it is a modular system that is changing minimal parts. You don't have 4 different systems for multiple axles, which would then turn into like 32 different systems because of different axle diameters and widths and whatnot. So we're able to offer more with less.
Nice.
So we have 2 3-links, we have 2 4-links, and that's just the back. On the front, it's phase 1 because it's just a 3-link in the front. We don't do a front 4-link. Too many complications there. But we're trying to offer product for the guys who are building hardcore, the guys who doing a little bit of overland and want to keep the factory gas tank. Maybe they've got smog issues because the state they live in sucks and doesn't like it when you move gas tanks and stuff like that. And and we reintroduced our underbed coilover mounting system. that we originally had years ago, but it was a pain in the butt to manufacture.
Okay.
So we came up with a newer, more manufacturing-friendly design.
Nice.
So, yeah.
What was the original? What was your first product? What did we start
First
with?
product was the front 3-link brackets for an 85 pickup or 4Runner that were for a mini truck axle or diamond.
Okay.
And so we've since then, of course, changed to being able to accommodate multiple axle diameters, multiple vehicles, pickup, 4Runner, Tacoma. We've got the Chevy axle or Dodge axle. We just launched the Super Duty axle for the any of the vehicles that came with a factory 3.4 or 2.7. So your 95 through 02 if it's a 4Runner, or 04 if it's a pickup. Lots of different offerings there, as well as, like I said, the parallel rear 3-link or triangulated. That, the parallel one will allow you to keep the factory gas tank if you do have issues. And everything we've always done has always been with the notion that if I can't drive it on the freeway at 85 miles an hour, I don't want it. It's no good to me if it's only off-road.
Okay.
So I didn't have a trailer. I didn't have property. I didn't have a pickup truck to tow with. So everything I did was, I live in LA. I want to go to the Rubicon. If I can't drive it, it's no good to me.
Interesting.
So it hurt a lot for me when I went from Leaf Springs to coilovers because there wasn't the tech support with the product that I purchased. And everything I did originally made the vehicle completely undrivable. I had horrible death wobble. You'd touch the brakes and, the bumper would pretty much kiss the ground.
Oh my God.
You tap on the gas and you're looking at the sky, and it was all over the place. And so the standpoint that we took I took when I said, I'm doing this, was it took me 5 years to make this thing drivable on the street. I'm going to maintain that with anything I choose to do.
That's an interesting concept, because obviously if you're not having to build your vehicle to be a street only vehicle or a streetable vehicle, there's obviously some different things you can do to the vehicle in order for just off-road only stuff. Do you feel like you're sacrificing performance and suspension by offering kits that you are designing around being able to go 85 miles an hour on a street if you want to?
We sacrifice a little bit of ground clearance at the belly.
Okay.
But only about an inch.
Oh.
Other than that, everything I've ever done to make it drive better on the street is actually translated into better rock crawling and off-road ability.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually had the opposite effect of what I originally anticipated we would have, or I would have.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool, because that goes kind of contradictory to what a lot of people would think. If you make something better performance on road, that you're going to have to sacrifice performance off road, or vice versa, right? You make something better off road.
Yeah, that's
you're
one.
You're going to have to sacrifice.
The other.
Yeah, you don't get to get both of them. So that's pretty cool. Before we get into some of the things that you did to accomplish that, let's talk a little bit about what is a 3-link, what is a 4-link, what are different types of 3-links and 4-links, and what does it mean if you link a vehicle versus what are we talking about there? And then that way we can get that out of the way and then start diving into some of these suspensions that you do and how you're accomplishing what you're doing here. So,
well, our traditional 3-link and 4-link is, or not just my own, but the variance that we see in the rock crawling world of a 3-link is 2 lower links, 1 upper link, and then a panhard bar. And
what's a panhard bar do?
Your panhard bar is your lateral control of the axle underneath the chassis.
Okay.
While your lower links are the ones that are handling your front to rear control, and then you can kind of summarize and look at the upper link and view it as rotational or torque control for the axle itself.
Cool. Those are all kind of the ways that you locate and control the axle underneath the vehicle.
Traditionally,
is what we're looking at when we're talking about a link setup.
And so when would you use a 3-link? What would be the advantage of that?
Well, it works great on Jeeps and Toyotas because we have an engine in the way. We have steering that is traditionally mechanical. It's not typically done with hydraulics, although it can be done. And it tends to package nicer in the front end than a 4-link does, which is why it's kind of the go-to for most builds. I know the Ultra 4 race guys, they'll go 4-link, but you know, when you're building a buggy and you have no spatial limitations, or at least a lot less, and you're not worried about DOT, this, that, or the other, you kind of get the freedoms that you want.
Sure. And in the rear, we can pretty much summarize that by gas tank.
Yeah, gas tank being in the way as your primary concern. So you would choose kind of what we'll call a parallel 3-link, where the lower links are parallel to each other, as opposed to a triangulated 3-link where the lowers are actually converging towards each other at the frame.
Okay.
So that's your kind of baseline.
So
for
they'd
that
be
stuff.
wider at the axle and narrower at the frame.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And when to use them is kind of, like I said, it depends on your limitations. Like if you've got the gas tank there, then you obviously can't use anything triangulated. You only get one upper link unless you flip them, unless you decide to go the other way with the upper links, which I'm still on the fence about.
Go backwards or reverse?
Yeah.
Triangulated?
Inverted kind of thing. Yeah. There's a lot of pinion angle change when that starts cycling though. So.
Oh yeah. Do you know Stellar Built?
Stellar Built, yeah.
Yep. The Moscow Mule has a reverse triangulated 4-link on it. And it was really fun to wheel behind that 4Runner all day long.
Oh, okay.
Going into the Rubicon Springs.
So you probably saw a lot of movement there.
Oh yeah, it has a lot of movement, but what's interesting is they figured out where the limits of the pinion angle are and limit strapped the axle.
Gotcha.
At those limit points.
And bump stopped
it at the other side.
Okay.
So the full travel, I mean, it still gets a shit ton of travel, but they have it limited on the travel to where the pinion angle is okay.
Okay.
So,
and while you're rock crawling, you're not getting full droop with the axle, which really causes the pinion to rotate.
Yeah.
When you're rock crawling, it sort of stays centered.
You only get about half the movement when you articulate versus both sides of the axle dropping at the same time. Yeah.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Can you give us a definition of a generic 4-link?
Generic 4-link is the same lower links as you have on the 3-link, but you're deleting the panhard and you have 2 upper links. And the triangulating shape from the bird's eye perspective of the upper links is what is laterally controlling the axle's movement. It's what's keeping it in the middle. Not so much
instead of the panhard bar.
Instead of the panhard,
you're getting the triangulation out of your upper links. Okay, so then that means your lowers are parallel in a 4-link?
In a traditional one, yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can have a parallel or a double triangulated. So
got it. What would be the benefits to either one of doing a parallel or a double triangulated 4-link?
From a strength perspective, none. There's actually no additional strength, which is contrary to popular belief out there at the moment. There's no additional strength had from triangulating the lower links. It doesn't help center the axle anymore.
Okay.
But the advantage to doing it is that it gets the brackets and the arms away from the rocks and down more towards the center of the vehicle, which is typically less prone to hitting obstacles or being an anchor point while you're crawling.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
That's cool. So the only one I'm going to tippy toe around a little bit, it would be trailing arms. Would a parallel lowers be considered trailing arms, or is there a difference between a parallel lowers and trailing arms?
Well, typically it's just done with parallel lowers. It doesn't have to be though.
So when you consider something trailing arms, does that mean that the shock is applied to that arm?
Correct. It just means that the shock or spring or both is on the arm itself as opposed to at the axle.
That's the only difference.
Yeah. And you can have a leading arm where it's in the front, but usually the steer of the tire becomes an issue and you can't really move the coilovers inward anymore because you have a frame and an engine and you just run out of space.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Packaging.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it really does come down to packaging.
It is.
It's what style of link system are you going to be able to do to best fit in your vehicle?
Correct. Correct.
We haven't mentioned radius arms.
Radius arms.
How do radius arms work and compare to 3 links or 4 links?
Well, radius arm's an interesting one
Mhm.
because there's a couple different types, right? There's kind of the style that you see on like a Ford Super Duty right now, where they're just using a standard, almost like a leaf spring bushing, separated by equal distance above and below the axle. And then one attachment point at the frame. Or there's the kind of what they call a wristed style, where you've got one attachment point for the lower at the axle and the other one is above it and inboard more towards the oil pan. And so you've actually got a little bit of triangulation out of the radius arm itself. And that's actually helping to reduce the amount of deflection in the bushing and help center the axle itself. Most of the time you still need a panhard, but not always. Depends on how light the vehicle is. Usually if you have a really light vehicle, you actually could get away with not running a panhard, provided the lowers are full triangulation. And by full triangulation, you can't do like a 72-inch lower arm and then fully triangulate it when you're like 33 inches at the axle as far as like the distance from one link to the other. Okay. Because by the time you have a 72-inch arm, you don't really have any triangulation. It's all about the angle, not necessarily that they're close to each other. So, and those have a lot less bind than a traditional radius arm setup. The problem I have with those is if you can fit one of those on your vehicle, you can also fit a 4-link. So what's the point of doing a wristed style?
Interesting.
Because the two uppers are the ones, well, kind of, but not really. You're only talking like one bracket at the frame. Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, one on each side, but that's typically not an issue. If you can fit that bracket, then you're free to go for it. The other style is like what you find on the Super Duties. It's great for street driving. Has no problem. The only issues I truly have with it is that you will run through bushings very quickly on it because the twisting forces of the suspension, one going up and one going down, is trying to literally twist the axle housing in opposite directions.
Oh, that's the twist. I was thinking it was just due to articulation and the bushing getting worn. Due to articulation, it's actually twisting the axle housing, though. Yeah, so the compression side would be twisted backwards, while the droop side would be twisting forward. And so that's what starts fatiguing the metal. It wallows out the bolt holes, or just starts destroying bushings. Gotcha. So there's nothing necessarily bad about a radius arm other than you will either see a lot of bind, or you should have just gone to a 4-link.
So what you're telling me is that the old FJ80 pin mod on the radius arms was a bad idea.
Pin mod? When they delete one of the bushings?
They would take one of the bolts out of the front of the radius arm and put a big cotter pin type thing in there.
Right.
And when you get to the trail, you pull it out, so you've got 3 points of contact on the axle instead of 4.
I wouldn't say it was a bad idea. Just kind of seems a little janky to,
You're removing the upper link on one of the sides?
Essentially,
so on the F80, the radius arm went under the axle.
It sits kind of under and cradles it.
Yep. One of the front bolts on the radius arm, you'd pull that and it would just free it up a little bit more.
Yeah. You don't have the counter twisting forces during
Sounds like a sway bar release sort of style.
Kind of, yeah. It is. Yep. It is, yeah.
It sounds like you're actually relieving the stress on the axle, but you're probably losing control of where that axle is.
Well, and that's a lot of people's gripe about a 3-link is they think it's less stable. It's not necessarily. It depends on how you build it. There's a lot of variables there, and I think a lot of it is spring and shock, and mostly shock. A lot of people think that they buy coilovers, they can just throw it on the vehicle and go bomb through the desert, and that's not the case. You've got to tune those things.
Sure.
You get a lot more out of your vehicle when you don't just allow it to be a slinky and a sloppy jalopy.
Right. So what you're saying is that if you have two of the same vehicles have the same suspension, but they have tuned shocks, or one of them has a tuned shock and one of them has like factory shocks, you're going to get the better performance out of the tuned shock.
Oh, by far. Yeah. By far. Yeah. If you just go in with off the shelf coilovers that have like a 10 stack on the compression and a 15 stack on the rebound, and then you put that up against one where the coilovers were actually tuned by somebody who knows what they're doing, it's like two different trucks,
Right.
completely different.
Interesting. So that's good to know. So it's not all about the link setup.
It is not. No,
You're relying to some extent on the coils,
right.
the coilovers, and the shock setup.
The system is definitely improved when you start eliminating stuff like roll steer and bump steer from the equation. But if you still allow the shock to not do its job and you have all that movement, you will still notice there is what I'll call negative driver feedback.
Yeah. And I think one of the major differences between the 3-link and the 4-link is the way that the axle, I want to say rotates. Swings. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So with the 3-link, you get a lateral movement of the axle.
Under what scenario of droop?
I would say full droop.
Articulated or double?
Full droop would be double.
Full droop is double.
Okay. I'm like,
So
where are we going with this?
Well, you do. Okay, so it's interesting.
So because of the panhard bar,
right?
It swings one way.
It has lateral
whatever
movement.
way the panhard bar is going.
Right. Yes, it does.
Where
yes, it does.
A 4-link does not allow for that.
That is true under the assumption that it is both sides drooping at the same time.
So does a
if you're talking articulated, then they both swing laterally based off of the height of the roll center from the axle. You have to think of the roll center to the axle as a pendulum. So if the roll center is high, the pendulum is longer and the swing is greater.
Interesting.
Okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole...
This is why we're talking to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So...
What is roll center real quick?
So
since we're talking about
roll center is essentially defined as the point around the suspension that the body rotates, or you can go the opposite way and say it's the point around the suspension that the axle rotates. Doesn't matter because it's kind of little bit of the same.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Depending on your perspective and what you're talking about.
I mean, because the body is just north above,
right.
and the
traditionally
it's
referred to as the body rotating around the suspension in that point in space. But there's lots of scenarios based off of so the roll center on a 4-link, provided the upper links are doing most of the triangulating, doesn't really change relation to the axle ever.
Okay.
But it will on a suspension with a panhard, because the middle of the panhard will move half as much as the axle.
Okay.
So it'll change.
Yeah.
But during articulation, because of the pendulum effect, a 4-link is still going to have the pendulum effect during articulation. It's only when both sides compress or droop that it won't have lateral movement.
So while you're out rock crawling, you're still getting a little bit of this rotational movement.
Yeah, you still get that pendulum.
But it's not as vast as a 3-link, right?
No, that's not true.
Really?
No, not in articulation. No, that's not true. And most of the problems, or most of the things I've seen from people griping about a panhard have been the fact that they've made the panhard too short and at too steep of an angle at ride height.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you start off at a 25-degree panhard that's 29 inches long, and your shock has 4 inches of up and 12 inches of down, then it's going to swing laterally a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you take a scenario where you've got, instead of 4 inches of up and 12 inches of down, take 6 inches up, 10 inches down. Instead of a 29-inch bar, use a 36-inch bar. And instead of it being at a 25-degree angle, you're using 0. Now, when it drops 10 inches, instead of having 2 inches of movement to the side, it's only moved a half inch. Suddenly, the panhard's not the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely how you build it is making a difference there. So.
Right. No, that's good information. I've always pictured it as, you have this connection at the frame and you have a connection at the axle, and when something drops, it's going to be rotating away. And in my mind, I'm like, it's an arc, right? So it's just going one direction like crazy.
Yep.
But when you start talking about the limitations of the suspension, the shocks and coilovers and how that falls, it's not, you're not dropping an immense amount.
Right.
In my mind, it's always just
longer,
this like 90
free
degrees.
swing.
Keep going.
Yeah, no, definitely
it's going
not.
far. So, okay,
Definitely
great.
not.
That's good to know.
So is that also why I've heard a lot of people say if you do a double triangulated in the front, you don't want to do a mechanical steering? Is that because you still are getting that swing? And so if you're getting that swing during articulation with a double triangulated setup, is that going to give you a bunch of roll steer or bump steer because you don't have a panhard to help control
You'll
that swing,
get
or?
a ton of bump steer in the front when you're using a standard crossover steering system that we all tend to use with straight axles combined with any 4-link up front, whether it's double triangulated or single. And the reason is in order to not move the steering wheel or the pitman arm, the swing of the axle and the swing of the steering have to mimic each other.
Yeah.
If they don't mimic each other, that's what's going to cause the steering to lose the battle against the suspension, because it's a variable and it moves, but the arc of the suspension doesn't.
Yeah.
It does
so as
what
the
it
suspension
does.
will drop out or do whatever it does, it's going to pull on the drag link essentially, which
Correct.
pulls on your pitman arm, which then pulls on your steering wheel.
Right. And you can
it makes
actually
you do
lose
things.
steering to one direction or the other based on which direction your bump steer is favoring.
Interesting.
So is it always an advantage if you have a mechanical steering setup to run a 3-link?
Always.
Because the panhard helps link the suspension to the steer if you set up the panhard correctly, I guess.
I'll back up one moment there. There, you can run a 4-link in the front as long as you can configure the mechanical steering to mimic the droop and swing of the 4-link, which would require a lot of like 90-degree U-joints or whatnot to basically put a front to back swing steering box underneath the driver's seat beside the frame, run to the front, be on a bell crank to pivot left and right. And so, yeah, it's technically possible. It's hard to replicate in production. In fact, in production, as far as like having multiple axles that you would support, I would say it's impossible. But you can definitely do it on the custom side of things. There's a guy on Instagram right now. I don't remember his name on the account, unfortunately, but he did the whole thing in CAD and put it on his 4Runner, and a guy did a bang up job. It looks beautiful. And unfortunately, I don't have the gentleman's name to give him the credit due. But it is possible. It's just packaging is extremely tight. It's very expensive. There's tons of moving parts.
A lot of complexity, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's a major pain in the butt. If you think cantilevers are bad, try this.
Sounds like too much work. That sounds like too much work.
Right. I'm picturing a bracket off of one of the links and then that holds your power steering box so that
the box
it moves,
on your link?
Yeah. So connect it all together. So when one moves, it's moving.
I think it's either just go full hydro at that point. Just screw it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. So how many vehicle applications, axle applications, suspension types do you offer at 4Wheel Underground, Brian?
For the front, we've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, there's probably about 16 different varieties of the front suspension based off a chassis and axle, where
it's like 16 different permutations of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And on the back, it's, there's 4 different suspension systems, but a lot more flexibility on the axle side.
Gotcha. Because you run the truss setup for the uppers.
Yeah. What we did with the rear, which was kind of like a 11th hour aha moment for myself as far as trying to keep inventory down, was instead of taking the truss and going down to the axle tube and then having 2 different trusses.
Okay.
And then, of course, that means you would also need 2 different lower links as brackets as well, based off of varying axle sizes. We took the truss down to the lower link axle bracket. So now I only need 1 truss, regardless of axle type.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an inventory decision.
Yeah.
What about OD size of the axle?
So we technically offer 2 different sizes of OD, and that for the back, and that's 3 1/8 and 3 1/2. And the idea there is if you're running a 3-inch, the 1/16 inch gap is nothing. It's irregardless.
Mm-hmm.
If you're running a 3 1/4 inch axle, which is really rare, you have very little to grind. Then on the flip side, the 3 1/2 fits pretty much all of the aftermarket stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're running a 14 bolt, which is 3 3/8, you don't have anything to grind.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Solved.
killed a couple birds
there you
with a couple less stones.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
But as far as the chassis side goes, we cross-platform capabilities. We don't tend to do any universal stuff. There's a big difference in the height of the frame rail from one vehicle to the next as far as the model years go.
Okay.
You take the 79, you've got a 4.5 inch frame. You take a 2018, you've got like a 7.5 inch frame.
Okay.
So whatever design you've come up with for the 79 isn't really applicable to some of the newer stuff just because of the frame rail height differences.
How do you deal with the differences in the wheelbase in the pickups? Because you've got
Yeah. First gens are super narrow.
Yeah.
Mini trucks are a little wider. And then you go to aftermarket stuff and you got even wider.
I'm talking about wheelbase, the different
wheelbase.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was thinking
for different long bed, short bed,
right.
King
cab, cab applications.
Right.
Well, and even, would first gen, second gen, third gen are they all the same? Are they different too? Probably.
No, they all vary.
Yeah.
They all vary.
Okay.
You take like a 85 4Runner, you got a 103 inch factory wheelbase. But if you take a 97, I think you got 106 as far as the starting point. Now on the front, a lot of times what we do is we compensate by adjusting the length of the swing arm. In the rear, you have the advantage of the frame rails being parallel to each other, and there's no unique shapes to them. They're just flat. So there's no hiccups, and there's no real limitation as to where you can slide the bracket. So instead of playing with link arm length, we'll typically just slide the bracket around a little bit.
Gotcha.
Right. Okay. So if I guess the majority of those differences would come on the pickup side. Sounds like the 4Runners are pretty similar.
Yeah.
Where
4Runners don't change a whole lot, and your wheelbases don't tend to vary just because everybody wants to maintain the wheelbase where the wheel well is. The pickup trucks on the other side, you get a extra cab or standard cab, a double cab, and short bed, long bed, and then of course you've got the guy with the double cab or the extra cab. He wants to shorten it because it's too long. So we see a lot of variation there.
So do you offer different links, different kit setups for a long bed versus short bed, or do you just slide the brackets around on the frame?
So like things like anti-squat don't really change that much on wheelbase. You have to change drastically for a setup to change.
Okay.
And that's where, oftentimes you'll see a lot of brackets have multiple mounting hole positions so that you can change anti-squat to dial it in for either your tire size, your wheelbase, or that particular vehicle. So, and there's a lot of offerings for that as far as a lot of companies are concerned.
Okay.
So,
gotcha. Yeah, that was my. We noticed that your kits are set up, based on vehicle years,
Yes.
right, on the website.
yes.
And so we were looking at the pickups. We're like, well, a regular, standard cab short bed is going to have a 30-inch wheelbase difference from a king cab long bed or something. I don't know, whatever it would be.
Right.
And so we were kind of curious how you tackled that, but I guess that makes sense. If you're the anti-squat numbers wouldn't change that much. You'd have to change it like 6 feet, 7 feet in order to change.
Yeah, like
how
even
that
when if you
behaves.
reduce it, like say 18 inches of change, depending on your starting point, you might only see like a 5 or 6% change in anti-squat, which quite frankly, I challenge anybody to have an ass dyno that sensitive that they can tell the difference.
Yeah.
Princess and the Peace story.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 5-6% is not going to make or break anything on that.
So what is anti-squat and anti-dive? Because I think when people start talking about link suspensions or building link suspensions, I think a lot of people get caught up on anti-squat and anti-dive numbers.
They're a really confusing topic and one that's massively overrated. So it's just it's a calculation of how much the chassis is essentially being forced up or allowed to move downward during forward or reverse or braking.
Okay.
So anti-squat in the rear, you step on the gas to move forward. how much resistance does the suspension offer to the chassis, and it's based in percentage. And believe it or not, you can have over 100%. So it's essentially a force vector, which is just how much push is the lower link applying and how much pull is the upper link applying during forward movement of the vehicle. And that's the basis of it. As far as magic numbers go,
Yeah.
there aren't any.
Okay.
However, I will emphasize that there are negative numbers you don't want. And personally, anything over 100% is the wrong thing to do.
Okay.
So if you're moving forward, anti-squat will keep the butt from dipping, and it will also keep the butt from lifting during braking.
Okay. That makes sense.
But the negative effect is that you can get tire chirping with too much anti-squat as opposed to tire spin with too little.
When you mean chirping,
When
you
you'll
say
hop.
we'll hop,
You'll go like you go out to Moab and you got 105% or maybe even 90%. You might, based off of a lot of other variables, see that the vehicle starts hopping, and then that's how you end up breaking stuff. Is because the suspension is actually trying to be shoved into the ground and the body shoved upward.
It's separating the wheel from the chassis.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And although that does tend to push more on the tires and add traction, there's always a point at which tires can't add any more traction.
Yep.
Which, that's a whole nother lead in on other topics and other aspects of suspension. But I tend to favor a little bit less than a little bit more when it comes to anti-squat.
A little bit less than a little bit more. Okay.
and less being, I mean, is that closer to zero? I mean, where are we?
Mm-hmm.
Can you get to zero?
There's a huge range, right? Like, and it does depend on what you're doing. Desert racers, they really like 0 and 20 because they want to see weight transfer during acceleration and braking because they want to push the vehicle around. Mm-hmm. And the negative side of one of the other negative sides, other than wheel hop that you can get from anti-squat, is during torque loads, you can actually cause the vehicle to stop compressing the suspension because it's the rotational force coming from the axle back to the chassis is actually trying to force it away from the chassis. So it would negate the spring rate and basically stiffen it. So
interesting.
It'll have an effect during hard braking over chattery terrain in the desert. Or on a track course. It can cause a loss of traction.
Okay, so that makes sense. Then I assume is anti-dive just the opposite of anti-squat then?
It is. It's the opposite, but it's because the links are on the opposite side of the axle, it works differently.
Okay.
Same principle applies. But while the rear is anti-squatting, the front is technically anti-lifting.
Yeah, that makes yes. Yeah, and because they're inverse of each other.
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
Hence why different kinds of suspension, front and rear, can play strange roles.
Absolutely. Yeah. So trying to balance those out and get something that is predictable is always the end goal.
Yeah. So that means then that if while the rear is trying to not squat, then the front is trying to not lift. Are they always kind of fighting each other then? Always. Whether you're braking or accelerating, so it's interesting because the upper and lower link are always doing the opposite things of each other. Okay. And then that is flipped when you're talking about front and rear. Okay. So you'll have the lower link of one is in compression, the lower link of the other is in tension. And then vice versa when you apply it to the upper links. Gotcha. So you're always trying to balance that for rock crawling, acceleration, and then braking because you don't want it to dive too much. Yeah. But you don't want it to lift a whole lot either. Well, you don't want the front end to lift during braking. If the front end is lifting during a hard braking, you seriously have way too much anti-squat in the front. Yeah. And I've had customers that have had that. Yeah. They came shopping for me. They came shopping to me because they had that. Let me rephrase that. Yes. If your rig is lifting a lot during braking, does that mean it's diving a lot during acceleration?
if it's lifting during braking, is it? No, it would be completely neutral and stay. It wouldn't move during acceleration.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to think now. So is there different scenarios where you may want the front end to dive during acceleration or lift a little bit during acceleration?
Scenarios there during acceleration, lifting of the front that's usually a desert thing where they're trying to make the front end lighter so they can dance over the obstacles, and that's one of the reasons
Stay on top
why
of the whoops kind of thing.
Right, exactly. That's why they don't want a lot of anti-squat number or anti-dive numbers in their suspension.
Okay.
If the butt end is squatting, they're lowering their center of gravity, and they're letting the front end lift a little to dance over the whoop sections, while the back end is really kind of the rudder of the vehicle at that point, and what needs to stay with 100% traction as often as possible. And ultimately, that's really the goal, is to make sure that you've got traction to the tires under all circumstances. Otherwise, you don't have suspension.
Yeah, right.
Ultimately, that it all comes back around to traction.
Yeah,
and that's all it is.
Yeah.
So.
What about like a rock bouncers doing hill climbs? Is there a scenario where they might build in diving into their acceleration?
Well, the nose isn't going to dive during acceleration.
It will never.
No.
That never happens.
No.
Okay.
No, I've never seen that. I don't know if that's physically possible.
Okay.
You'd have to have some really janky geometry going on with that one.
Oh, we could Jimmy rig it.
We could. You would know. No.
Okay.
Can we go? Do you have another question, Tyler, in regards to that? I would like to possibly ask so if somebody has too much anti-squat, what do you do to fix that?
It kind of depends on why they have too much. Ultimately, it's the side angle profile of the upper and lower links and how they are kind of like converging towards each other. That is too steep. And you can have it for one of two reasons. Either the lower links are too steep, which is that they're inclining from the axle upwards to the chassis a lot, or it's the upper links doing that. You need to increase the vertical distance between the upper and lower links at the chassis, or decrease it at the axle. One of the two. You need to make them more parallel to each other in order to reduce the anti-squat numbers.
Okay.
That's
fine.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah. If you reduce the distance between the upper and lower links at the axle, then you're not getting as much strength on torsional control of the axle, though, right?
That's true. Yeah, there would be. Well, I should say strength is an interesting word.
What would be the right word for that then?
I'm searching. No, it's not necessarily control. It depends on the joint that you have. If you have a big 2-inch joint, do you have a inch and a quarter? Do you have a 3/4 inch joint?
Okay.
Are you using 1/8 inch material as far as the bracket goes? Or are you using 1/2 inch plate?
Gotcha.
So, I mean, you can run less vertical separation between the two if you're compensating in other ways.
Okay.
So,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're strengthening up your brackets or your joints, then
yeah, you might need to go to a bigger bolt.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have enough meat around the bolt itself, and you're wallowing out the hole and ripping the bracket.
Yeah.
In which case, you just need to increase that. So the fix for it isn't as simple as just do this and you're fine.
Right. Well, what about, so let's do the opposite. So we just talked about anti-squat. How about anti-dive? Is there a rule of thumb to help fix anti-dive?
It's the same exact scenario.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's literally the same. It's just a mirror image. So,
all right. Is there any other situations when you're linking a vehicle that somebody might come around that is causing a problem, and how do people solve that?
I would need a scenario.
Yeah, well, all I really know is anti-squat and anti-dive. Is there like one side lifting higher than another when you're accelerating? Is that a common issue?
Torque lean?
Yeah, is there a torque lean issue that be solved by link setups, or is there another scenario like that from linking
I
a setup?
mean, with torque lean, you can go spring, you can reduce anti-squat, you can tune shocks, you can change gearing. A lot of times it's a gearing issue.
Oh, okay.
You're perhaps too high of a gear. You need to go lower, or vice versa.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of variables.
Nice. So Justin, you've been over here.
Thanks for hanging out
Silent
with us
hanging
for
out in the corner.
an hour and 31 minutes on the clock.
What's your vehicle here? And you said you've had multiple suspensions or you've had multiple vehicles. And so now you currently have the 3rd gen 4Runner. Was that correct?
Yeah, 3rd gen 4Runner.
Mm-hmm. And which suspensions are you currently running from Brian here?
Yeah, so it's a 99 3rd gen 4Runner, and I have the 3-link front end set up from Brian.
Which axle are you running?
It's running the, what is it, a 66 or 68?
66-inch diamond.
66-inch with diamond.
Okay.
With 16
solid
inch
axle hubs.
Yeah, solid axle hubs. 16-inch coilovers. I've got everything maxed out within 1/8 of an inch everywhere. So it's sitting roughly at about 22-inch frame height and 6.5 inches of up travel at ride height
Wow.
Dang,
That's
awesome.
pretty good. Yeah.
with 37s.
That's pretty
Okay.
good. And you're able to package the 16-inch coilovers without going up outside of your hood or anything?
Barely.
Really? 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah, it is very tight.
That's
Everything
impressive.
is very tight.
Is the coilover mounted below the axle or?
It's kind of on the side. It's still above the axle, but it's not center on the axle tube. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep moving the mic around.
Yeah.
I think yours were based off of the knuckle gusset from Diamond, and your center of bolt line for the coilover mount was basically top of the axle tube itself ish.
It's
Okay.
just below top of the axle tube, and it's behind the center line of the axle.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Wow. That's impressive to be able to shove some 16-inch coilovers in there like that.
Well, 2 years in the making. It's been a trick,
Uh-huh.
but absolutely worth it.
You didn't want to just go with the 14s?
No, we had this conversation a few years back, and
Uh-huh.
I was just sitting there talking to
No
Brian,
comment.
and I'm like, "So, what's the most I can do?" And he's like, "Well, you could do 16s." And I was like, "Are we sure about this?" He's like, "Yeah." And I just kind of blindly trusted that. Went with it. Very happy with the results, but man alive, 16s in the 3rd gen is not easy to do.
16s in a lot of any OE vehicle is a lot to do,
Yeah.
I think. So that's impressive.
Yeah. Kudos to you.
Yeah, I'm bummed I couldn't bring it out here today, but next time.
Yeah.
Deal.
Okay.
So before that, you had an 80.
Yep, I had a 91 FJ80, and I also ran 4-wheel underground 3-link on the front of that.
So what drove you to deciding to purchase the 4-wheel underground 3-link setup for your 80? Like, why, out of everything that was out there, why'd you choose that one? Putting you
Well-
on the spot here, Brian.
No,
No pressure.
well, to be honest with you, it's kind of a funny story. I bought the Hellfire knuckles for the FJ80 with no intention of doing a suspension change. And then I realized you can't do the Hellfire knuckles without changing the suspension. So, or I should say with the stock suspension, because you can't run high steer on that.
Because you can't run the same steer setup. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I started searching around. I didn't even know about 4-wheel underground or Brian at that time, and started doing some research, looking for, kits that were out there, possibly shops that would do it, and eventually found Brian's website, gave him a call. We started talking, and before you knew it, struck up a bit of a relationship. I am a web developer by trade, and so I was like, "Hey man, let's talk about your kit." I loved everything that I was hearing on his end, and at the time he needed a little bit of help with the website. And so we made a transaction. I got his setup, and the install went pretty smooth, especially with his assistance.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we got it out on the road, there was no looking back at that point. It was incredible.
Nice.
So because you got the Hellfire knuckles, you had figured that you had to change something else to match.
Well, let's put it this way. It was more of I got the Hellfire knuckles, and it was the shove that I needed to do the rest of it. So
right. And one of the reasons that I like Brian's kits is that for the most part, it's a kit. It's a full setup. It's not, there's no DUI to my knowledge in regards to it. You have certain locations that you're going to put the brackets and, on the axle and on the frame, and, you link it together and you're good to go. And that's, I'm putting words in your mouth now, but that's what you were thinking is you didn't have to DIY this.
Yeah, because I'm no suspension expert, and I'm not even, I know enough about it, and I've been around on the forums long enough to know that, you can put your own system together, go buy links and joints and brackets and, try your best to figure something out. But I also wanted to daily drive this rig.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want to be trusting my lack of knowledge.
Sure.
And after talking to him about it, he, it was a no brainer. It's like, okay, I can get, a tried and true product that, I know is going to work. Everything has its place. It's purpose built for this vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
That's no brainer in my mind.
Yeah. The geometry is taken into account, that for that specific vehicle, everything's been tested. All the math has gone through.
Right.
And you throw it on and you're driving down the freeway at 80 and you get all the articulation that you ever need.
Yeah. I think my first trip in that vehicle after building it was probably doing 80 on my way to Fordyce, and then wheeling Fordyce flawlessly, and then driving home same speed. I mean, it was absolutely incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Nice.
That's what.
Of course, I chose the easy trail as my maiden
Your
run.
first one.
Yeah,
right.
You're like, let's drive the freeway for a few hours because you're from the Bay Area.
Yep, got to make sure it doesn't fall apart first.
And then let's try one of the hardest trails, possibly the hardest trail in Northern California, and
I would agree,
and see what damage I could throw at it, and it did fine.
It did excellent, and kind of touching on what he was saying before, especially living in San Jose, there's no way that I'm getting a trailer. There's no room for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so having a vehicle that at the time, especially the FJ80 was my daily driver. So I needed to know that it was going to work on road every day, as well as, satisfy my needs.
Go
of
do
off-roading,
Fordyce with it too. Yeah.
Sure.
So
you cruised up here in a Tundra.
Yep.
And you have a 3rd gen 4Runner.
I do.
So you have a little bit of space.
Well, a little.
You have a garage that's full of some toy.
The family is a Toyota family, so there's lots of Toyotas. I think at one point we had 4 FJ80s in the family.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Currently,
spread the wealth, man.
Currently, there's one FJ80, a Tundra, the 2 3rd gen 4Runners. I think that's it.
What kind of family are we? Like, are we talking about like your parents and
the
significant
folks
others,
too?
Parents? Okay, yeah.
Like,
man,
not just me.
And
I mean, I wouldn't be mad about that.
well, yeah. I mean, I've got 3 Toyota pickups, so
yeah,
can't argue there. Love those things.
How does the front end drive?
How does the front end drive?
Justin, you've had 2 of my suspensions on 2 different vehicles. So you've had both the FJ80 and the 4Runner in stock configuration, which you say, or have told me, and I'm sure other people can attest to, drive very nicely on the road.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you compare my systems, linked coilovers, air bumps, rock crawler on the street to a factory vehicle?
Yeah. So I'm about to say, as we all know, but the FJ80 drives fantastic in its stock configuration. Everybody talks about that. And so you would imagine it would be hard to do better with a more off-road centric suspension system, right?
Mhm.
Especially on coilovers. That's what everyone would imagine. And after doing the installation, I kind of figured it would be a little more boaty maybe than, coil springs.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't at all. I mean, it drove straight, it handles tight. Think, a lot to do with Brian talking about spring rate and valving. That's huge. Because I can imagine if I just slapped any coilovers on that system, it would be a lot more boaty.
Mm-hmm.
But all these things play a role. They all tie together.
Because that was going to be my question was, did you go and get the coilovers and everything tuned right away?
From him.
Oh,
yeah.
You tune them before you send them out with everything?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. I've
know
got a
that too.
question. I've got a questionnaire that I send out. It's like 10 or 12 questions. You basically circle that, the ABC kind of thing that applies to you.
Okay.
I already know what the vehicle weighs.
Yeah.
I want to know how you've changed it from the OEM spec, and now I know how to adjust my coilover for both the spring rate and the valving, and then that's what you get. That's what I send out the door.
That's pretty cool.
Front bumpers, winch, rear bumper, what kind of load you're carrying around in the truck on a average trip, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you sell your kits, you have the option of buying coilovers in the kit.
Correct.
And then whenever somebody does that, you valve them appropriately after this questionnaire.
Absolutely. I think that's part
cool.
of suspension tech. I mean, if you're not you buy a brand new car, the spring and the shock are tuned for that car.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're gonna link your vehicle, I think it's only right to offer that to everyone else as well. I mean, unless they don't want it, then which is totally an option. You got a homie hookup somewhere, then go for it. But for those of us that don't, then I try to offer that as a complete package.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's great. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a step above what any other, air quote, DIY suspension thing is going to be. You've got to figure out, your links and your setup and where things are and do all the geometry yourself. And then you go buy coilovers.
And you got to figure out your spring rates and your valving and everything on those.
Right.
And if...
And here's one thing that I need to do better at actually getting the word out. But if you buy coilovers from me and the spring rate's wrong, I'm going to replace the springs for you. You're not going to pay for the springs. I'm going to send you new springs. You can send back the old ones, but I'm going to send you new ones. You're not going to pay for them. And if the valving's wrong, send it back. I'll revalve it. If you go, hey, it handles G outs great. I can hit this huge drainage ditch around the corner from my house at 80 miles an hour. And it's butter. But the moment I get on a cobble road, I need a kidney belt. Okay, I screwed up somewhere, or possibly the questionnaire was filled out wrong. I don't really care. Send back the shocks. Let's get you a better valving for your setup. I'll take care of you.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. That's a big value added into a suspension purchase. If you know that you're going to get the tuning of everything as well.
Absolutely.
With what you're getting.
No, it's a complete. If you're buying the complete package, you're getting the complete package.
That's really cool. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail Justin here, but I just, that thought had occurred of how did you get all of everything tuned up? So that's cool.
Yeah. So to touch a little bit more on what he was asking, the comparison, it's driving a stock vehicle, what to expect to a degree, right? Putting a completely aftermarket suspension system on the same vehicle, I would argue to say that it's better. It's more comfortable. There's more cushion in the suspension. It drives just as straight. It handles tight, takes turns. Even with the rear end of the FJ80, which is a huge cargo space,
big booty,
filled from the bottom to the top with camping gear, it still never felt unstable.
Interesting. Wow. Nice.
Without a sway bar.
Oh, yeah. Without a sway bar too.
Yes. Wow. Without a sway bar.
Okay. And it was just as predictable.
Just as predictable.
That's awesome. That's you can't ask for anything.
No, yeah.
And then I have the 3rd gen 4Runner now.
You're going to screw me over here. Now everybody's going to expect that. Damn.
Setting the expectations really high here.
They should.
They should. Yeah.
And now we've got the FJ80, unfortunately, was sold the year that I got married. And then I had kind of a lull period with off-roading. I didn't have a vehicle. And then eventually got the 3rd gen and decided to build that and went with his system again. And this time it was like, okay, we're doing it. We're going all out. And so we did the max, maximize everything. And same thing, pull it out of the driveway, half expecting my welds to just pop off, rolling backwards, but bombing down the freeway, 75 plus miles an hour, straight and true and super cushy, way better than the stock IFS in terms of comfortability, for sure.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
And did you do the rear suspension on the 3rd gen 4Runner when you did it?
So the maiden voyage in this vehicle was out to the con, what we were just talking about it back in August.
Mm-hmm.
And I was running his kit on the front and the stock in the rear.
Stock?
Stock plus lift springs.
Okay.
And
how much lift would you say the front end has currently with the way you set it up? I mean, you did everything. I mean, you did the motor mounts, you did the frame plates with the steering. I mean, you went all out on
how much lift? I don't know how to
how much
quantify that. In the rear, it's probably 2.5 inches.
2.5. Oh, that's pretty.
It's
low.
really
Wow.
it's low. The truck is low.
That's.
I mean,
low.
getting into it after the front end was done felt almost the same as. Well, it feels the same as when I had the 2-inch. I think I had a 2.5-inch snore and steel kit on there before.
Wow.
But I mean, it's easy to get in and out of.
Mm-hmm.
It's super low. But anyways, Rubicon took it out there on its maiden voyage after the front end install.
Mm-hmm.
And, just past the granite flats, going up some crazy obstacle. I think there was a malfunction in my rear e-locker and the rear end just grenaded. So currently it's sitting on jack stands with all the parts for the rear kit waiting to be installed.
Nice.
So as soon as that's done, we'll bring it back up here so you guys can take a look.
Nice.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out.
Yeah. So the 16-inch coilovers, 3-link front suspension, the way you configured it, it's sitting roughly 2.5 inches higher than stock.
Which is a hard,
Plus or minus.
Yeah. I feel like it's easier to quantify by frame height, right?
All right.
Yeah.
22 inches.
22 inches.
Okay, when you say 2.5-inch suspensions higher than stock, we're not including the tire size lift in that, are you?
No.
Okay.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, good. I was just say that's incredible. Wow.
No,
So-
22-inch frame height, 37s, very low.
That's sort of what I've been striving for Samantha.
I didn't think that having 16-inch coilovers on that low of a suspension lift without cutting up through the hood would be possible.
No.
It's barely possible.
With 6 inches of shaft showing.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what you said?
6.5.
6.5. Yeah.
I did have to
That's
trim
insane.
a little bit of the core support in the hood, but that's it.
Did you have to modify the frame?
Just notching one side a little bit.
Really?
Yep.
And you lifted the engine.
Mm-hmm. 1.5 inches.
And so did you build new motor mounts for that?
Those are also from Brian.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. So new motor mounts just lifted it from within the kit.
Yep.
That's cool. Dang.
Those are optional, depending on how low you want to go.
Depending on what motor you got.
And
I have
the
them for
motor.
the 3.4. I don't have them for a 2.7.
Mm.
And it is for that frame vehicle, not like you can't do a 3.4 swap in a 92 and have that work. You'd have to make your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler's 3.4 is about at its limit anyway.
Yeah, it's actually dropped down 1.5 inches, 2 inches down the frame rail. The engine mounts are, and dropped backwards another 2 inches or so.
Okay.
So I'm pretty much like in the firewall. Like I can't access any of my heater hoses.
Oh, fun. Yeah, I've had that before.
So,
Yeah.
But he did that so that it wasn't chopped. The hood didn't.
Yeah.
Did you do a hood chop on
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have to cut out any of the core supports in the hood. It didn't have to do a hood chop at all. The little lift razors right there just to help airflow come out from the engine bay. But yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. That's everything that I'm hearing is sounding freaking fantastic. I'm really impressed that you're able to get better handling characteristics, more predictable handling characteristics on the road, while still having a really killer off-road performance. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I would agree.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it.
Heck yeah.
nice. Anything else about your kits that we don't know about? Like you provide pre-tuned shocks and coilovers with your kits. Any other fun little things that you do a little bit differently that is kind of included in this all-inclusive package?
Don't know. I don't. I kind of take it for granted because I've been doing it for 12 years. But
well, let me rephrase. Let me ask this. So, if somebody's going to buy the Extreme kit, because I didn't know you supplied 1.5-inch lifts for some of the motors. But if let's take a first gen Tacoma with a 3.4,
okay.
and if they buy the ultimate package,
Yep.
and feel free to look this up if you need to. What is all included in the ultimate package?
The ultimate package is you're getting the 3-link brackets. You're getting the frame plates to strengthen the outside of the frame as well as mount the steering box. You'll get the motor mounts for the 3.4, the coilovers, obviously the air bumps with resis, the shock towers, aluminum lower links. So a little bit of an upgrade. You'll get our new limit strap pinch bolt mounts, which are a pinch bolt designed for the limit strap that just clamp onto the lower link using the bolt for the limit strap itself as the pinch point.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get all of that plus the tuned coilovers.
Mm-hmm.
When you talked about the power steering box, are we rotating that and moving it forward?
It's pushed forward as far as you can go. That kind of vehicle or that size tire, you will end up kind of going through the core support to mount the IFS box, which is definitely a much more friendly box than the FJ80 box, because the FJ80 box, just because of where you have to position it to get proper steering geometry, it becomes a real estate issue as far as the coilover packaging and the bump stop packaging and everything else. So it's much easier to use the IFS box, push it in front of the axle, pop a hole through the core support, and mount it as far forward as possible.
That's awesome. So It sounds like you've thought of everything for the most part.
Sure.
I mean, you've been doing it for 12 years and you've been refining it. You're on phase 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's been a lot of variants.
Upgrading it as you're going along, and
yep.
Maybe you find a different way to make it better and get better.
We've been tailoring everything just ever so slowly, tweak it here, tweak it there, trying to make it more user friendly. I'm actually considering taking it to the point of making the coilover towers less DIY and just make it a package where instead of a bolt on, it's a weld on, but there's a little bit less in choices, because if one thing I promote is 14s are really all you need. I did 16s on my own because I had to make sure of what was possible and what was not. And it's a pain in the butt to do a 16, as Justin can probably contest it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make my life a little harder.
Yeah. 16s are just very, very hard, and you have to go wider on the axle. There's no way you can take, like a stock mini truck axle on the factory frame and shove a 16 on there. It's not gonna. I mean, maybe somebody did somewhere along the line, but I mean, my tolerances are usually like 1/8 of an inch, and I can't fit a 16 on it. So, and quite honestly,
without going up through the hood.
No. It isn't that it's going through the hood. It's just you don't have. So we have that pendulum effect from the roll center.
Oh yeah.
And so anytime you articulate, the top of the tire that's compressing is moving in towards the frame while the bottom is moving away. But what that means is that the compression side of the coilover is moving towards the tire. And the droop side that's articulating, the coilovers moving towards the frame.
Yeah, hitting
so
the frame there.
Your tolerances of clearing the tire and the frame simultaneously, as well as when you go to a 16-inch coilover, you actually narrow the axle when it articulates because there's more travel. Right? It's a beam and it's lifting on one end, so basically that distance gets less. It just makes it harder and harder to install. So when you go to a bigger tire, you go to a wider tire, you go to a longer shock, but you have this narrow little axle, everything you do is making it more difficult. And that's why I will often tell guys 14 is all you need. In fact, I've only had one customer in 12 years ever call me back and say, I wish I'd gone 16s.
14s is a lot. 14-inch travel coilovers. You get plenty of travel out of those things.
Well, and especially if you got 14s front and rear at the same time, you don't need more than that.
No.
Somebody might.
Somebody might.
Not me.
Somebody might.
What's Bobcat's 12 and 10, I think.
Yeah.
12 and 10.
Yeah. I got a picture I can show you after, but of the suspension cycled out on a big rock, and you can't see it in the picture, but I still had probably 2 inches of travel to go before I was maxed out. And you don't need that much.
Yeah. I'm going back on that. Bobcat's 12 and 8. 8 in the rear.
8 in the rear. Okay.
Jeez. And I max it out and bottom it out.
Yep.
But I can't go bigger because then the body then I have like 3/4 of an inch of up travel.
Okay. Right. Yep.
So it's so horrible unless I try, and they're straight up, right? So if I triangulated it, that'll all change.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we were talking earlier, Brian, about some limitations in regards to diameter of possible shocks that people would get, especially in my case, running a mini truck axle.
Right.
You want to hit on that real quick and maybe talk about it in regards to if people were to buy them from you?
Shock diameter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really promote 2.0s for rock crawlers. There's just no need for, there's no need for a 2.5. A 2.5, the diameter of the body is 2.5. The inside or the outside diameter of the spring at that point is almost 4 5/8.
Wow. Okay.
While a 2.0, the outside diameter is closer to 3 9/16. So you've got a substantial difference there, almost an inch or more in diameter that you have to try and account for, as well as anytime you go from a 2.0 to a 2.5, the length of the body itself technically increases. So you've got a 14 maxed out. Maybe it's, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember the numbers, but maybe you got 19.5 inches compressed length on a 14 2.0.
Mm-hmm. That
same 14 on a 2.5 is now 21.5.
Wow, that much more.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Not only a bigger in diameter, but it's now larger overall in length, and you're trying to package that in an engine bay with a brake master cylinder or an air box or a cruise control or whatever. And it's just harder and harder and harder the bigger you go. Yeah. So I really, and there's no, unless you're desert racing or or even just recreational high-speed desert, you're not going to see a dampening efficiency that would lead you towards a 2.5 over a 2.0. There's no need for it. You can do plenty of valving in fact, you can overvalve a 2.0 even on an 8,000 pound truck and just go, hey, that's too stiff. There is such a thing.
Is there any concerns about shaft strength in the shock when you're talking about 2.0 to 2.5s?
Not really, because both of them tend to use a 7/8 shaft. There's not really big. I mean, unless you're going air shock, which uses like 1.25 inches.
Okay.
So they're both 7/8. I recommend the 7/8. If you're shopping something that's a 5/8, limit the stroke. Don't use a 12 or 14 on a 5/8 shaft to try to limit it to a 10.
It's good stuff. I don't know if I have much more questions. I think we've covered a lot of different topics, a lot of different knowledge, educational points here about suspensions. Did you want to get into cantilevered suspensions? I'm just kidding.
Don't cantilever and do trailing arms at the same time. That's a bad idea.
Fair. All right. So cool, man. If people had questions, if they wanted to find you, ask you questions about suspensions, ask you questions about 4Wheel Underground, stuff that you provide, how can people do that?
info@4wheelunderground.com. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at 4wheelunderground.
Cool. Simple and easy.
Absolutely.
Cool. If people wanted to send in some voicemails, you guys can always do that. We have a voicemail number set up, 916-345-4744. And what we can then do is send them over to Brian and then get him to respond back, and we'll play it on the podcast. How's that?
Absolutely.
That'd be fun.
Absolutely.
Play a big old phone tag.
Yeah.
Literal phone tag.
Justin, do you want people to check out your builds? Do you want to share your information out there, or do you want to stay hidden behind a computer monitor?
No, I'm good with that. Sorensen JG on Instagram. And then if you want to reach me by email for some reason, hey@sorensenjg.com as well.
Perfect.
I like it. Jimmy, how can people get a hold of us?
Yeah, you can. Well, you just heard our phone number, so you can call in there. You can find me over at Snail Trail 4x4. You can find Tyler at 4x4 Toyota Tyler. You can also email us, Jimmy or Tyler, at snailtrail4x4.com.
I like it. I like it a lot. And so I guess with that, without further ado, final words for everybody. We'll start with Jimmy because he's used to it. I'm used to putting him on the spot. Jimmy, final words for everyone out there.
I think Samantha is going to drastically change its plans here after this conversation.
All right.
Again. Justin, final words for everybody out there.
Go get yourself 4-wheel underground.
Brian, any final words for everyone out there?
No, none at all. Just go about your business.
Perfect. And with that, my friends, keep crawling.
You want one of those? Okay, hold on.
I prefer one.
Do you really?
Kind of. What's green and has wheels?
I don't know.
Grass. I just lied about the wheels.
No, yeah. What has wheels and flies?
Plane.
Well, true. And a garbage truck.
And a garbage truck?
Yeah.
Why does that fly?
They have flies all over the place.
Oh,
it's garbage.
I get it. Okay.